Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Swiss Nordic Bio 2021. My name is Hampus Nilsén, and I'm a Trade Commissioner representing Business Sweden. Together with our co-host, Varto Securities, and our partners, the Swedish Embassy, the Norwegian Embassy, Business Finland, InnoSwiss, UBS, and our sponsor, SIX, we are very glad to once again welcome so many healthcare companies, investors, business developers, and innovation scouts under one this year digital roof. This is the first digital Swiss Nordic Bio, and with a record number of over 300 participants, more than 150 healthcare companies, over 100 investors and business developers. And we have 700 meetings scheduled during today and tomorrow. The agenda of today looks like this. So we will start with the Fireside Chat between Michael Dalston, Global Head of Research at Pfizer, and Björn Odlander, Managing Partner at HealthCap, where they will discuss everything from Pfizer's focus and partnering strategy to the COVID vaccine program. This will be followed by two panel discussions. The first one on the topic of successful investing in life science, identifying winners. And the second one, elevating life science companies from startups to unicorns. We will then listen to SIX and Vinnova, the Swedish innovation agency, about opportunities with Eureka Eurostars funding. And then there will be a break at around noon, Central European time, and at 1 p.m. The one-on-one meetings start. Meetings are scheduled during this afternoon and also during tomorrow. You find your meeting schedules on your personal profile on the website, and my colleague Mrna has also sent you an email with practicalities and a link to the schedule. I would recommend you to log in advance now during the morning or during the break, and to start a meeting, just to try it out and make sure everything works in your browser with the video and the sound. So that could be a good idea to try that out. So we know you're all eager to get started. So without further ado, we would like to welcome Sweden's ambassador to Switzerland, Jan Knutsson, to the stage to give his welcome on behalf of all the Nordic countries. Welcome, Jan.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Sweden, Finland, and Norway, I welcome you to Swiss Nordic Bio 2021. This is the 15th time we organize Swiss Nordic Bio, an event driving investments to Swiss Nordic life science, bringing internationalization to Swiss Nordic biotech SMEs, and being a catalyst for research and development collaborations. This year's Swiss Nordic Bio is special in the sense that the importance of the biotech, medtech sector has never been more evident than at this moment. Never has the attention of the whole world been so focused on this sector. Never has such important progress taken place so quickly. And never have ideas, innovations, and investments in this field been more urgent, not only related to COVID, but after this pandemic, we will have an increase in the demand of all types of care, as so many hospitals around the world have had to focus on COVID and have not been able to handle all other medical needs as it normally would. So this year, Swiss Nordic Bio is also special in that we have never had so many participants. More than 300 guests have registered, and I'm glad to note that more Swedish companies than ever are participating. There is certainly a match between Switzerland and the Nordics when it comes to healthcare and life sciences. We're all focused and innovative countries. To increase our impact, we have to work together. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our hosts and partners: Embassy of Finland, Embassy of Norway, Business Finland, Business Sweden, InnoSwiss, UBS, and Vater Securities. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and I wish you all a successful Swiss Nordic Bio 2021.
Thank you, Jan. Our next welcoming address is from our Swiss partner, InnoSwiss, represented by Leila Shveri Boudiab, who is a member of the Innovation Council. Welcome, Leila.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 15th consecutive Swiss Nordic Bio Conference is opening today, and I would like to thank the embassies of Sweden, Norway, and Finland to Switzerland for their continued engagement to nurture cooperation between our countries. Without their firm commitment and the establishment of cooperation with partners from the private and public sector, such a long series of this successful conference would not have been possible. Due to the current situation, the event is held virtually for the first time. We appreciate the flexibility and commitment of all involved parties to continue cross-border R&D cooperation despite the difficult circumstances we are all facing. The Swiss Nordic Bioconference has become a cornerstone for cooperation between Switzerland and the Nordic countries in the domain of life science. The format of connecting venture capital, corporate investors, innovation promotion agencies, government organizations, startup companies, large pharmaceutical companies, and universities is a success. This is the reason why InnoSwiss is a partner of the conference. Today, the preparation of favorable framework conditions for companies to scale up is a major concern in our countries and on a European level. InnoSwiss launched a scale-up coaching initiative providing tailor-made advice to the various issues such companies might have. But this is only one piece of the puzzle. The preparation of an environment where scale-up related services are interoperable and easily accessible becomes increasingly important. The cooperation of various private and public stakeholders on all levels is key. Looking to the list of participants and the mix of stakeholders from many relevant organizations from all involved countries, I see the Swiss Nordic Bio as a good example of a living scale-up practice. InnoSwiss and its partner agencies in the Nordics are supporting the Swiss Nordic Bio to foster R&D cooperations that are created here today by facilitating access to the intergovernmental Eurostars program. Eurostars provides funding to cross-border cooperations of R&D performing SMEs with large companies and universities with a high innovation potential. Although Eurostars is a bottom-up program, the majority of the projects are within the life science domain. The Swiss Nordic Bioconference also leads the way to investors to bring R&D results to the next stage. This is a perfect combination. I hope you will enjoy the exciting program of this year's Swiss Nordic Bio and benefit from the opportunities to find an investor, hear more about the latest trend, establish business contacts, and discuss cooperative R&D projects. I wish you all a very successful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. Our next welcoming note is from our co-host, Vater Securities, represented by partner Jonas Ribbelöv. Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction, Hampus. At Vater Securities, we're extremely proud to be part of the 2021 Swiss Nordic Bio Conference. Once again, we're teaming up with our co-hosts, Business Sweden, and with our partners, being the Swedish Embassy in Bern, Business Finland, the Norwegian Embassy, InnoSwiss, UBS, and the Swiss Stock Exchange. Through this important annual conference, we have together created a meeting venue whereby companies are able to showcase themselves towards investors. This year, we have over 300 participants from 20 different countries, not only from Europe and Switzerland, but also from countries further afield, such as the US, Israel, United Arab Emirates, and the UK. The presenting companies are active within pharma, biotech, medtech, diagnostics, and the buoyant business sector of digital health, from the development phase through to the commercial phase. Participating investors are financial institutions, private wealth funds, family offices, and high net worth individuals. Hereby, we have the prerequisites for jointly creating the most successful venue to date. The past 12 months since our previous event in Zurich have indeed been eventful. From a corporate advisory perspective, we can clearly see a vibrant Swedish life science market with increasing commercial activity in the form of private placements, IPOs, acquisition financing, and companies re-domiciling and relisting to the Swedish stock market. Consequently, Vato Securities in 2020 achieved a record top line, and we now aim to double our headcount to meet the rising demand for our services. At Vato Securities, we apply a long-term commitment towards our clients, also importantly during the intermission between the funding processes. This is achieved by applying a one-stop shop approach, supporting our clients in, for example, building their own bespoke equity story and communicating the same to the financial markets. Hereby, we define the addressable market and outline the market potential, defining triggers, and couple to this an activity-based 12-month action plan, hereby creating transparency and in time building and boosting trust. And on that note, we hope that the 2021 Swiss Nordic Bio Conference will be the most successful event to date. And I, for one, hope that we once again can meet up in person in Zurich, as we usually do at next year's conference. Enjoy.
Thank you, Jonas. Up next is the exciting Fireside Chat between Mikael Dahlsten, Global Head of Research at Pfizer, and Björn Odlander, Managing Partner at HealthCap. Take it away, Björn.
Thank you very much, Hampus. So I'm very happy to sit here with Mikael Dahlsten, Global Head of R&D at Pfizer. And it's a great opportunity, especially in this current situation, to be able to have a little talk. But maybe first, for the benefit of the audience, Mikael, would you like to tell a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the place where you are now?
Thank you, Björn, for inviting me to share my thoughts and experiences at Pfizer for such an exciting forum as the Swiss Nordic Bio Fireside Chat here, in a way bringing the Alps of Switzerland and the Nordic region together here, two very strong biomedical science places. Yeah. You know, I was trained as a physician scientist originally in Sweden. And I think that experience of both learning the breadth of medicine in patients and at the same time doing a PhD, in this case, in one of the immunology disciplines, stimulated me to think about translational research and how a career in industry could allow you to provide new medical solutions for patients by bringing together that academic medical advance and ability to probe biology with medications or vaccines, and from that experience develop hopefully breakthrough therapies of vaccines. And I was fortunate to train early in Europe for some 15 years in the pharmaceutical industry, including Pharmacia, that much later became a part of Pfizer through one of the acquisitions, and Astra. And then 15 years ago, I moved to United States, ended up leading R&D for Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, And then that company got acquired by Pfizer, which made me 10 years ago end up in this role. So I would say my curiosity in trying to bring at a larger scale than what you can do in being a physician or in academia, new medicines to patients was really driven by a lot of opportunities, how industries changed. And I've been really fortunate to spend this decade with Pfizer, which I think has been a dramatic time of change inside the company as a response to how science and medicines in this post-genomic era allowed us to really bring a lot of our dreams to realities in how we wanted to see the way of looking at disease and find much more precision intervention possible. I never thought that we would see so many things in such a rapid time come to surface, but it's been a fabulous journey. And particularly, I'm proud also to be part of a team that brought this entrepreneurial spirit to a company like Pfizer that was a pretty diverse healthcare company and now been focusing to be a biopharmaceutical science company.
Mm. There are so many threads immediately to follow up upon in the conversation. And it's so fascinating to reflect on how fast science progresses and our abilities to treat patients, that was unheard of, just a couple of decades ago. So it's a remarkable time to be active in. And of course, this how fast scientific pace can be today is, of course, evidenced by your extraordinary accomplishment to bring the COVID-19 vaccine to market in less than a year. Could you share a little bit of that experience and how that evolved?
Thank you for the question, Björn. I think it's indeed an illustration on both how we can work in a new way and how an urgent challenge may force you to do things differently. On one hand, I think it's a great example how biotech and pharma can work together to bring complementary skills and at the same time tap into a rapid growing academic knowledge space. So, of course, it started with the academic contributions in sequencing the SARS-CoV-2 virus, initially in China, followed shortly by Italy and later also in the United States. We had been collaborating with BioNTech, a German company focused on mRNA-based vaccines. And I should say, while it offered an opportunity, it was part of a longer-term strategy for Pfizer to bring together cutting-edge technologies, whether discovered inside our company or through the biotech companies, as a platform that broadened how we could approach diseases. So modalities, as we call them, and Pfizer was originally seen as a small molecule company, but now have basically embraced mRNA vaccines, gene therapy, complex biologicals, while retaining the small molecule foundation, I hope, at its cutting edge. So with that, I just wanted to say we were fortunate to rather be able to propel around a strategy of having access to that new technology, in this case, through our relationship with BioNTech. We were focusing on flu. We wanted to disrupt the flu market, which is still kind of somewhat older technologies that is slow in turnaround time and has led to that vaccine space to be pretty modest in preventive efficacy. But we got intrigued by the mRNA vaccines, what we learned 2 years in flu, that gave us the confidence to engage with BioNTech in a dialogue where we jointly could use that experience and move swiftly into the COVID area. We brought together a deep expertise in infectious diseases, in vaccine development, from discovery to making hundreds of millions of doses. And BioNTech was particularly skilled in the design of the mRNA sequences, how to envelope them in lipid nanoparticles, and also to study immune responses in patients. We saw the timeline as a challenge. We put a challenge ahead of us saying, we started in March together, but we really wanted to have a vaccine ahead of a possible flu season that would add two difficult viruses at the same time in the fall, October, November. So this challenge really went from a timeline saying we need a vaccine in 10 months to make this winter season not a disaster. And then we took that challenging timeline and went backwards and say, what do we need to do every month, every week to make that aspiration possible? We shared it with regulators and said, look, the only way for us to succeed, if you are able to find resources to talk to us basically in real time and give us feedback constantly as we share data. Of course, the pandemic threat on the planet made many regulators feel that that was a mission that they really wanted to embrace. And within basically, some 6-8 weeks, we were able to take the mRNA sequence, optimize it, and bring a few different candidates into the first phase 1 and phase 2 studies. After spending time in looking at immune responses in patients, we had to take a very tough decision in late July. Which of the constructs should we bring to pivotal studies and start scaling up to be prepared to have, possibly billions of doses in 21. It was a very tough decision to take. We had basically two choices, one that we knew more of, one that we knew less of, but the second one we thought had possibly more promise. And we took that decision, which led to the now world-renowned BNT162b2 vaccine that is encoding entire spike, optimized through some unique proprietary changes we introduced. And we embarked on a phase 3 trial. And of course, as you know, we have recruited, in the end, more than 44,000 patients when the trial read out, and we have continued to recruit. And we were stunned to see this 95% vaccine efficacy across all ages, across all...
It must have been a spectacular moment.
Björn, beyond, getting my children and getting married, it was almost competing with that moment. I jumped out of my chair and when we were sitting around the table, it was actually the first time we all came together in the leadership team for months of remote working. And it was really unbelievable to see that our hope for this new technology, the promise of new technology, turned out so quick in basically it was 9 months to be that stunning data. And the data monitoring committee really said you should rush to the regulators to try and get emergency use authorization. And things went very fast to the second week in December, it was given EUA in US and a little bit more than a week later, conditional approval in Europe. And to be the first company was extraordinary. We didn't start first. We were actually 2 months behind some other companies. But I think we just worked so well jointly with his vision and our CEO, Albert Bola, that personally was almost part of the project team, really encouraged us to say there shouldn't be any barrier when we're working with a pandemic. Money shouldn't be a limiting factor. It's only the number of hours every day and night we can put in. And that made us find this extraordinary opportunity to work in parallel, not in sequence, to take financial risks up to 2 billion and put the best of private biotech with a public company and make this extraordinary, what I feel is, once in a century of medical advance.
So is this a culture you have nurtured within Pfizer to allow this sort of thinking out of the box and the ability to act fast and decisive. It's really a remarkable coordination effort just to get everybody on board and get this going.
You know, very early in my career as a physician scientist, I think what really mattered was providing new science to solve medical problems. So I was always intrigued what we coined as first-in-class science.
Yeah.
But it's usually technology that allow you to open up that new space.
Yeah.
So that has been part of our strategy. Our CEO really, I think, felt that this was a time when pharmaceutical companies should focus on breakthroughs that change patient lives and move away from more incremental new treatments. And I think that converged and in some way made the entire company have a mindset of courage.
Yeah.
We were focused on excellence because it doesn't matter to start first. You want to finish first so that you're part of that new wave of innovation. And we also had values like equity and inclusiveness and even some joy. And I think that made us really run around the clock for these 10 months. And so different companies like BioNTech from Germany, a New York-based American pharma with a legacy over 170 years to work so well together. And yeah, I think you're right. It was science, it was technology, and it was the new culture that helped us do this together.
Maybe call it passion.
Passion was absolutely part of this. And I think we were aware of our passion and also put a lot of effort on decision making. And again, something we have been almost been on a boot camp for, because passion may feed very optimism biased decision making. And you probably, as one of the really renowned venture capital experts in Europe, know yourself about the passion in many of these companies and how you need to be aware of biases. And we actually had been having boot camps with some expert on biases. In this case, I worked very closely with Daniel Kahneman at Princeton that got the Swedish Nobel Prize for bias in economical decision making. That made us actually in this particular journey recognize when we did have biases, take a step back and make the right decision.
That's it. That's very interesting. So are there any certain biases you think are more harmful than others, or how do you view the sort of the universe of biases when it comes to research and science?
Yeah, I think there are these biases where you get blindfolded. You have so much start with a view and you feel it's a disappointment to change your view.
Yeah.
Our ability to select the second rather than the first vaccine candidate was really the awareness that while we started with a view we had something industry only on the first candidate, we realized that the larger spike rather than the smaller RBD contained more T cell epitopes. And that was a very late arising data. And we had really to fight against the bias to continue with what was the kind of more comfortable path.
Yeah,
and it's
an ability to change when you see the fact, to see the data, you change. You're open to change. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's one of the toughest biases once you have started with your passion in one area. But I'm pleased we make that change. As the results evolved, it was a better candidate. It had more tolerability that was favorable for patients. And we could give a more optimal dose and get that very nice mix of antibody response and breadth of T-cell responses. So science and objective decision-making turned out after a period of thriller before you had all the data. We also had to get data on both older age and younger. We didn't have everything when we took the decision. But we had scientific intuition that we relied on, and it all paid out nicely this time.
So now you mentioned a couple of other keywords, which I think is fascinating. And you talk about intuition and the importance of that. And how do you encourage people to actually trust intuition in a big organization where you might be held accountable for your mistakes? And then somebody says, but my gut feeling tells me otherwise, or my scientific intuition, to put it more well phrased maybe. How do you deal with that in a big organization?
I think in a big organization, you always ask yourself, you're facing, and in a way, it has similarities to the venture capital world that invest in the many opportunities of different talented biotechs. You ask yourself two questions. Does this look like a real innovation? And are the unknowns that could that influence the probability of success too many? So when you just add them up, the probability of success becomes so low.
Yeah.
Or is it really just one major scientific challenge you need to solve? At the same time, I put a lot of emphasis on who is the innovator. So you basically balance the innovation by itself with who is presenting it, the innovator. And I think intuition comes from having proven track record. So it's much harder to predict first-time innovators from those that are serial innovators, serial entrepreneurs. And when you have colleagues in your company that you worked with for a long time and seen them coming through with multiple innovations, there is more trust in scientific intuition. So that was part of the equation.
That's interesting. And also when you are put in a position to evaluate based on intuition, of course, you need to have an experience base that is big enough. And having been around and made your own mistakes probably helps when you rely on your intuition.
And Björn, I should say that we have developed a quite granular decision trees that include some of these aspects that you and I discussed. But we also try to bring science and business together in the sense that we do respect. It's really hard to fully understand the potential of a project in early clinical development. But we do try to make projections on how many patients may this product be suitable for.
Yeah.
What is the value to society?
Framework. Yeah.
A framework. And what will be the hurdles for payers and for colleagues that may be facing those.
Yeah.
So it is a multifaceted decision tree. I like when science and business comes together. They challenge each other, the long and the near term.
Yeah, and that's what makes a change for patients in the end, because without the business, there won't be any use of the science. So, yeah. So you mentioned also disruption and the sort of ability for new technology to break new grounds. And could we discuss a little bit on other uses of the mRNA technology? Where do you see this going? Because it appears to be a remarkable and versatile technology that can be used in many areas.
Yeah, I think technology is the most disruptive approach within biomedicine. And of course, there are also similar leaps in science, but I think the technologies really are the ones that are easier to predict. For the mRNA vaccines, we certainly will return to the flu space. And I think an mRNA vaccine should likely be able to have the same kind of stunning efficacy. We had 95% vaccine efficacy to SARS-CoV-2. And, even having 90% against flu, where today it's, maybe on average 50%. You will need to improve the mRNA vaccine technology, likely to be self-amplifying.
Yeah.
Because you usually address, up to 4 different flu variants. But that's a real exciting space. there are other viruses within infectious diseases that I think could be very suitable. There is certainly a lot ongoing with using mRNA for therapeutic vaccines in cancer.
Yeah.
And I think there is also a growing era of using mRNA as therapeutic products to deliver sustained expression of a protein, and even possibly in gene editing, and trying to replace today's protein-based, virus-based with mRNA technology. So I think it's very versatile, has a lot to offer, and some of it going to be more low-hanging fruit. Probably the next viral vaccine will tap into what we have learned, and other areas will naturally need more sequential improvement. But as a whole, I think it's going to add to the contribution that we've seen with antisense RNAi, but now more focusing on expressing larger proteins that can be used either to turn on or turn off responses in the human biological system.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating what this toolbox can do, as you suggest. So you have mentioned now a number of new technologies that you obviously have an interest in. Could you elaborate a little bit on Pfizer's strategic directions, which areas you are looking into, and how you see this evolve?
Yeah, so Björn, we kind of look at things in almost like a three-dimensional matrix. So the first dimension is the type of therapeutic areas and key diseases we're active in. Because we kind of feel that whether we partner or discover organically, we do always better contribution when we stay in a field that we know deeply, or enter a new field and build that knowledge. Yeah. So for us, it's oncology, it's immunology, it's infectious diseases, genomic medicine in rare disease, and cardiometabolic diseases, cancer, etc. These are our 5 major areas. When I speak about infectious diseases, it's actually both vaccines and therapeutics for our hospital care group. So within those areas, we have built a modality platform. We tend to speak about established modalities, adjacent and emerging new ones. So established for us would be small molecules and monoclonal antibodies. Adjacent would be expanding their target reach. So with small molecules, we have learned to not just do antagonist, but agonist, as we understand receptors. There is a very exciting field of degraders within the small molecular area. Within biologicals, we have seen increasingly multi-specific antibodies that can, have not just one target binding, but 2 or 3. And then, of course, emerging has been gene therapy, RNA-based, and cell-based, etc. So that's usually how we try to build a mix of constantly staying cutting edge through partnership and internal investment on our core small molecules and antibody-based, and then build entry with gene therapy, mRNA vaccines, as they start to be really the right solution for a key challenge in one of our diseases. The third axis of time is important. You don't want to enter too early when you're going to hit all of those obstacles, but you can't wait too long when you're basically just doing more of the same.
Yeah. Now you need a certain amount of boldness, but also judgment about when something really is too early. You mentioned collaboration as another key word, key principle, and HealthCap is, of course, very happy that one of our portfolio companies, Vivet, has a very fruitful collaboration with Pfizer within genetic therapies. And the topic of the collaboration is Wilson's disease, which is a rare disease. And you mentioned rare diseases as one of your key areas of interest. Which rare diseases are you interested in? Do you have a lower cutoff, or how do you evaluate which projects are worthwhile pursuing?
Yeah. So Björn, on one hand, we are looking at scientific feasibility. So we really like to focus on single gene disorders within the rare diseases.
It should be straightforward with a probability of success. Yeah.
Yeah, like Wilson disease is a transporter protein for copper metabolism as one example.
Very straightforward.
And then we focus on which technology. In this case, we were fascinated about work in one of the Spanish universities that was founding scientists of the Vivet on particular focus on in this space of liver diseases, the genetic ones, and the use of AAV to deliver an intact copper transporter to patients. So that was a good fit for AAV-based therapies that work very well on liver. And I think a good example, we do look at, for a company of our size, is this going to be enough sizable patient population? Is the medical advance enough substantial versus current treatment so that, the value provided can be rewarded accordingly? And, we do have internal kind of metrics. And I tend to say, we are not focused on the ultra rare that are hundreds to a couple of thousand patients. We focus around those that are, close to 10,000 or maybe several thousand that have tremendous need for new treatments. I think the smaller ones are much more suited for more specialized smaller companies. And we actually even are contributing to, together with NIH, to look at ways to make technology available for the ultra orphan, where there may not be commercial opportunity, but these patients have tremendous need. So we thought Wilson disease, as an example, was an interesting, maybe more in the middle, not as large as hemophilia type A, but and the treatments today are being pretty old and difficult, chelating based. And we thought it would be a tremendous patient advance for one and done gene therapy here. And we do like, when the founders are still active in the biotechs like this one, continue to innovate. We like when it's backed by experienced venture capital group that provide the leadership. I think that this is just an illustration on how we look at things. And it allowed us, I think, to come not just with a potential buyout, but we could put our substantial pharmaceutical sciences and manufacturing gene therapy together with Vivet and provide a journey to, if successful, immediate launch with high quality gene therapy. I think it really has the potential making 1 + 1 3 to 4, not just 2. So this was our thinking. And I hope it illustrates so many other companies in the Nordic Swiss bioconference look at Pfizer as a company that likes to be agile, nimble when you see us. We are willing to tailor the financial needs for a deal. This was an option deals. It can be licensing deals. It can be a research collaboration. It can be an M&A. It depends what fits best for both sides of the partnership. And we like to be seen as someone not just providing funds and a path to market, but actually scientific excellence that can accelerate the program.
Yeah, and I can really second that, since from the inside in Vivet, we are really delighted with the collaboration with Pfizer. But could I ask you, what do you expect of the partner company? How do you see what does the partner company bring to the table besides having a great idea and a product candidate? So how do you see such a collaboration work?
I think the European biotech arena, since this is a little bit the focus of this conference, highlighted by Switzerland and Nordic being two rising biotech areas, has great potential. It's not as crowded space as the Boston and San Francisco of America, and I think it's a rapidly growing number of entrepreneurs that are somewhere between the academia and the more larger biotech companies there. So you have a good talent base. For us, we would like to be involved rather earlier than later. I think our contribution is higher when it comes to accelerate value generation. If we come in earlier and can share what we think we are good at, bringing the end game in early, what properties a product needs to have to be able to, at scale, be valuable. And the later we come in, the more we find we often need to invest time to fix pharmaceutical issues, bottlenecks between, making material for clinical study or at scale for market, and whatever other knowledge pieces we may have running global clinical studies, etc. So if we are coming in, around IND, early clinical, we often find that the synergistic value between us and the biotech is the largest. It doesn't mean that a biotech may sell out to us. It just means that we start to work together, and the value generation can still be tremendous for both. We, of course, are open to any type of deals where there is value for patients and for the companies. And we do late-stage deals. We do deals where we acquire companies when they already have products in the market. In Europe, we did, beyond the Vivet deals, we acquired protein replacement for achondroplasia with a French-Spanish company, Theracon, that we've been very excited. More recently, we did larger deals with Array Biopharmaceutical that had marketed products and where we were able to expand our R&D engine in Colorado to invest in them to actually grow. And we went into gene therapy with Spark Therapeutics in the Pennsylvania area. We did with Sangamo in the San Francisco area. That was more on R&D collaboration. We acquired Bamboo Therapeutics before they finished their IND for DMD gene therapies. These were just examples that shows that we really tailor what is the best for both partners. We want to create a win-win.
Yeah.
That makes you to continue to do great science together.
Yeah, you've been very active and I guess very dynamic in how to expand or actually refine your footprint. Is this something that we can expect will continue, that you will be as active as you have been in the coming years? Or do you have to digest what you have sort of taken on?
Great question. It is actually the opposite, that we will be as active or more active. As part of our external shared strategy is that we would like to see that, maybe every second program we bring through phase 2, which is kind of the big moment when you really get data, are you working with an active product or not? We would love to see that every second product that comes through phase 2 could be coming from external source, whether early or acquiring or partnering at phase 2, because I think that's the perfect moment to build in excellence into R&D jointly. So we are very open to and have actually our CEO has kind of ring-fence both money to step into a partnership, the type of upfronts, but also operational dollars, so that it doesn't become, an either or, that it's both are facing the same quality hurdles of great science, state-of-the-art technology, but we have separate actually funding, which is pretty unique. It's actually the first time in my career over 30 years in different companies, I've seen that dedication to be active in the external space. And we didn't speak so much about the academic kind of start of companies. We actually are pretty active there too. We have a venture capital corporate arm that can partner and help companies come off with other VC companies. We also have a Center for Therapeutic Innovation, which provides for academic an opportunity to have an antibody or a small molecule made by us in a partnership and test some of their ideas and later spin out the company with us or without us. So we try to be active across the entire value chain to stimulate biomedical innovation and be a true partner to many of the stakeholders.
Yeah, it's a wonderful undertaking. But could I ask you, how do you cope with sort of the classical problem of not invented here that at least has existed in many companies? You have probably come across it sometime.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard. It's almost encoded in the genes of scientists. But what we try to do is, on one hand, in the culture, really emphasize that the credit of innovation is as large to anyone, whether you did identify a great company with talents and you brought a partnership to Pfizer, or you discovered it from the start. And I'm pleased to say that the type of objectives that we could give to scientists and my own objectives are independent whether we did find it through a deal. And we get all rewarded equally for great medicines that deliver data sets. And I think that has been something very important, and get out of that traditional way of rewarding something where you have been kind of working long more because there is more sunk capital or something you buy into. Sunk capital mentality is really something that brings R&D innovation down. We have tried to recognize those limitations. And I think scientists start to feel really eager to more look at the patient needs and care less about whether they brought in a partner or whether it's been one of the long haul areas of Pfizer.
So then we circle back to culture and the importance of having the right culture in an organization and how fruitful that can be. And I think it's obvious to everybody that you have been very successful in implementing this, as been shown now not least in the COVID-19 situation. What will be the next big leap for you at Pfizer? What are you sort of really longing for, or where do you see the next breakthrough come?
Yeah, so as we have discussed, my left eye focusing on looking what is happening inside our own labs, my right eye on what's happening at a conference like this one. But, I think we want to have very high aspirations. So we talked about gene therapy. That's really about providing cure of diseases. So we are looking for those that type of cure-like treatments in areas where progress has been slow, or turning disease into chronic remissions. Like in cancer, advanced metastatic cancer may not be easy to cure, but you could turn it into a chronic disease by being able to monitor evolution of cancer and have different consecutive precision medicines over many years. We see in some areas where patients may live decades nowadays. Immune oncology has been one example. And then with vaccines, really to prevent development of life-threatening infections, halt the emergence of multi-resistant, difficult to treat bacteria and fungi and viruses that constantly mutated. You know, we spoke about the COVID area where we started, and, you know, a little bit, of course, you could say, wow, you were successful, now you move to the next. Well, we won the first battle, and I think the current vaccines will be remarkable for some time, but you need to continue to be present. The virus is mutating, changing features, and this gives us an opportunity to come in the future with additional boosting opportunity on the original vaccines. And that's how we really look upon innovation. If you have those aspirational goals, cure, long-term remission, prevent disease, prevent relapse, that guides you to breakthrough science, and only breakthrough technologies can make that leap. And I think the data that we saw with mRNA vaccines are stunning compared to the data that we have seen with the traditional platforms that are delivering data now. So I hope to see many breakthrough technologies out in the biotech arena with great platforms and products, and we will be eager to partner with our knowledge, our capital, and make a leap of progress for patients, Björn.
I think that's a fantastic ending statement. Should we call that a wrap and join in a fantastic prospects for the future and the interesting times we are living in? New technology brings really value to mankind, and so thank you, Michael, for this interesting chat, and we'll hand back to Hampus now.
Thank you very much, Michael and Björn, for this very interesting discussion. And once again, thank you, Michael, also for joining the conference. And next up is our first panel discussion about successful investing in life science, identifying winners, with European healthcare investors and moderated by Lachlan Toward, equity research analyst at UBS. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Hampus. So, good morning and welcome to today's first panel discussion titled Successful Investing in Life Science, Identifying Winners. It's my pleasure to host this discussion this morning, where we'll explore some of the most important considerations for investing in life sciences companies. Questions like, how do investors see the midterm outlook for the sector? Which industries or trends within the sector are most exciting to investors? And of course, how to identify the most promising companies. To do that, I'm joined by four expert panelists. Ulrika Bjerke, Chief Investment Officer of the Arctic Aurora Life Sciences Fund. Ulrika has 30 years experience managing healthcare investments. She was formerly the head of life science at the Third Swedish Pension Fund. Her fund focuses on disruptive innovation in the pharma and biotech sectors. Natalie Fleury, who is co-head of sustainable healthcare equities at HSBC Asset Management Switzerland. Natalie has a 20-year track record as an equity fund manager, specialized in healthcare and biotech. In 2018, she founded her own boutique asset management company, Viopass Partners, specialized in sustainable healthcare investments. Aitana Pera from Canica International. Aitana is responsible for healthcare investments at Canica. She has a background in life sciences venture capital and has also worked as a sell-side pharma analyst. And Astrid Samuelsson. Astrid is a portfolio manager at Handelsbanken Asset Management in Stockholm. For more than 10 years, she has been responsible for a global healthcare portfolio. So a very warm welcome to all of our panelists. Welcome.
Thank you.
So let's start by focusing on the big picture and discussing the outlook for the sector as a whole. We have seen some enormous progress in the biotech industry over the past decade, and that has also been reflected in tremendous strength in biotech and life sciences stocks, particularly since last March. So the first question is, do current prices still leave scope for upside from here? Are they justified by the fundamental outlook for the industry? Ulrika Bjerke, let me start with you. How do you assess the outlook for the life sciences industry from here?
So we have a very positive view on the sector based on the flow of innovation coming and supporting the sector. We believe we are in the beginning of a transformational time within developing new medicines. So there is a strong underlying fundament for the sector. Then, of course, we need to respect the fact that some sub-segments of the sector has had a huge interest during 2020 and the latter part of 2020. So aside from those specific sub-segments, I believe that the sector has a very positive outlook. And actually, we are, I didn't mention that to you, but we also are launching a biotech fund right now, just because of the underlying strong fundamentals we are seeing.
Okay, fantastic. So still significant upside in the midterm as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
Let me turn to Natalie Fleury. Natalie, do you agree with that assessment? And Ulrika mentioned some subsectors where valuations have run maybe a little bit. How does the sector valuation look in your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. So first, I really agree with Ulrika just said for the segment of healthcare and biotech. The attractiveness today for this sector and for investors is certainly that first solutions for and against this pandemic come and will come out of the biotech industry, and we have just we see it with the first vaccines that have reached the market. So, and it's not only for the pandemic, but also for a lot of untreated diseases that we see, and the solutions come from the attractive biotech industry. And it's only to mention that today 2/3 of new products that reach the market have been developed earlier by biotech industry, and in the later stage either they are sold by large pharmas because the biotech company has been acquired, or the biotech company has an alliance with a large pharma company in order to reach as most patients as possible. So from the fundamentals that we see at the moment today, I am very optimistic and positive still for the segment going forward. From a valuation point of view, yes, certainly some sub-segments in biotech or in digital health have had a very good run just last year and into the new year, but there are still pockets and niches all in the biotech, but also in medtech and in diagnostics, where I personally still see a good growth and good potential and good possibilities for investors to stay in or to take a new position.
Fantastic, thank you. So quite a wide-ranging approach, looking at multiple different subsectors. We might come back to some of those sectors like medtech and diagnostics in a little bit, but let me move on and ask Aitana Pere. Both the previous speakers mentioned developments in treating challenging diseases where there aren't treatments, and there's been a lot of buzz about new therapeutic approaches to some of these diseases in the last couple of years. Do you think that's justified?
If I think it's justified that there has been a lot of buyers for the new treatments for new diseases.
In terms of the excitement around things like cell therapy, gene therapy.
Yeah, so I think cell therapy and gene therapy are in different stages right now. With gene therapies, there are really exciting new developments, and it's a space to watch. Of course, the question is always that needs to be resolved is how the reimbursement schemes are going to work. As for cell therapies, I think they are perhaps coming of age. They are becoming more scalable. They are becoming easier to manufacture, more off-the-shelf sort of treatments. So, but in both spaces, I think there is plenty of innovations that justifies the excitement. Of course, the question is, there is still significant risk lying ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And let me ask a similar question to Astrid Samuelsson. Astrid, we've just heard a lot about the innovations in the biotech space, in the therapeutic space. If we look outside the therapeutic space and we look at diagnostics, we look at medtech, as a global healthcare portfolio manager, Do you think there's also exciting equivalent opportunities in the non-therapeutic space?
Well, absolutely. I think it also goes a little bit hand in hand. I mean, one area that has sort of exploded is the whole concept of precision medicine, especially in oncology, and that goes hand in hand with the development in the diagnostic space. I think we're just at the very, very early stages of what can happen there, in particularly in the oncology space. I mean, really to think about personalized medicine in a real way, not in a sort of lumping patients together in large groups, but actually sort of finding the right therapy for the right patient. So I think that's an area we're heading into. And innovation in medtech is also thriving, I would say. I mean, we have just the whole area of remote monitoring for glucose measurements is just one area. Oxygen measurement has been really a big thing now during the pandemic. I mean, that has also been boosted by that. And the whole sort of interplay with digital solutions and technology, I think we are sort of just in the early stages of what that can achieve.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Now we've heard there about the big picture opportunities, but actually all of you have already mentioned areas within the sector that are most interesting. So I'd really like to dig into some of these in a little bit more detail. And actually, sticking with you, Astrid, you just talked about some of the digital health opportunities. You talked a little bit about remote monitoring. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's attractive specifically about these subsectors, and maybe why, even after a strong performance, they would continue to be attractive to you?
Well, I think the pandemic has shown that there's sort of new ways to sort of manage healthcare. And I've always been attracted to products that can simplify and save money for the system. And I think healthcare as a whole is really ripe for sort of some change here. I mean, the hospitals seem to sort of work in the same way as they've done for decades, really. And there's so much to be done on sort of how you handle I don't know, anything from radiology to pathology, how you sort of deal with the electronic health records, anything from sort of how pharma companies interact with physicians is probably sort of has been really old school with these huge sales forces on the ground. Is that really an efficient way to conduct the business? And I think many of them have discovered that these new tools or digital tools can actually do a lot. And we've already seen some examples. I mean, there are some companies that have cut their sales forces in the US by quite a significant amount. So it is happening, and many talk about that this development has just accelerated sort of a few years, that sort of the pandemic has sort of fast forward the whole development, and it's still early stages, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Let me go back to Natalie, because your fund is focusing on sustainable healthcare, and maybe part of that gets to this issue of the cost of healthcare, which is more and more in focus. I mean, we've had 5 years of something about drug pricing on the front cover of a major newspaper almost daily, and it's really becoming a big topic. So what does that mean to you, sustainable healthcare investing, and which of the areas within the broader life sciences field are most of interest to you? Is it also the same as Astrid highlighted, or are there other areas where healthcare can make itself more sustainable?
Certainly, there's pockets of interest where that Astrid also mentioned. So to come to our investment approach, what we see more and more, what the industry is facing more and more is access barriers, meaning that they cannot sell their products in each countries because countries and the payers have put in place some access barriers. And not only that, it's also at the end, it's a question of the price of the product. Is it a sustainable pricing, so that the product is getting a reimbursement in each of the countries the company wants to access? And so our focus is to search on one side, yes, for innovation, companies that bring innovation with their solution. It's not only therapeutics, it can be in any subsegment of healthcare, but combined with the fact that we look and we assess how the product, what is the accessibility and what is going to be the pricing and the price reimbursement possibilities of that healthcare solution. So for example, does this solution that the company brings help to reduce the days of hospital stays? Because we all know that this is one of the biggest burden on the healthcare system, the days spent in hospital. Or does this new solution help to reduce additional costs that the patient has because he's not well treated or not treated perfectly today? And these are the criteria that we look at when we invest. So, for example, we have invested since the beginning in companies that provide for diabetic patients these mini pumps and this access to CGMs to measure the glucose continuously. And because we know that if these patients are well treated and followed for their disease, they will have less additional treatment needs and have less additional costs, and in the end also use less insulin. So this is an aspect where we are very much invested in, and then of course we also, as Astrid and others, we have begun last year with the pandemic to invest in these digital health companies, because it's clear that in total, with patients that are remote or not all, everybody is in cities, that to have direct access to a health system can in total reduce total costs. So that's in very short how we access and how we invest when we search companies.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, some people you've both mentioned that these are groups of stocks that have really proven their worth during the pandemic, and that has been reflected into some of the valuations. So many people would look at these stocks and say, well, they've run a long way, they're quite expensive on traditional valuation metrics. How is this not a bubble? How would you respond to that? Because you clearly see a very strong positive outlook, but the near term perhaps for some people is a little bit more challenging. Do you agree with that?
Certainly, the stocks have run quite a while, but when you talk to management and when you look at certain numbers, the patients that have in the beginning were skeptical and have been obliged to use the system, if you ask them now, they would say, yes, I will continue to use these telemedicine systems and possibilities once the pandemic is over, because they have realized if they can have access to their own doctors, to the doctors that they know, they are very much agreeing and want to continue to use the services. So it's not, for how I see it at the moment, it's not a one-time event that is going to go over and to finish with the pandemic finishing, because the people have realized how easy it is for certain of what they need with their doctors, and they will continue to use it. I open the discussion to others of the panelists if they think differently or how they see it.
It seems as if we're broadly in agreement on the outlook there. Nobody bold enough to take the other side of that. Okay, let me pivot back a little bit to the therapeutic side. And Aitana, we talked about cell therapy, gene therapy. You talked about those treatment modalities. Where else in pharma biotech at the moment are you seeing great opportunities? Maybe also because I know you invest in pre-public market companies. Are there any things that are bubbling up maybe in the VC world that those of us who focus more on the public markets might not yet have on our radar screen as well? So very broad question to you, but what's most exciting?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, because really, as I see it, the public and the private spaces are sort of a continuum, especially if we take the Swiss Nordic markets into considerations. I mean, companies become public sometimes even at the point of phase 1 or even preclinical, And before that, it's very difficult to tell which innovations are going to be the ones that will really mature into something that is useful and makes a change. So as I mentioned before, I think cell therapies are really coming of age. I think we are understanding much more the biology of many rare diseases to be treated not necessarily with gene therapies. And that's also a space that is very interesting, especially if then those drugs can also have treatments in broader patient populations. That's great opportunities for biotechs to be able to develop something with their available funds that will be a proof of concept that will make a significant difference to patients' lives, and then a bigger partner can pick up from there. So rare diseases, I think, continue to be a very interesting space. And yeah, like Natalie was mentioned, also telemedicine, I think, is going to be making significant strides because it empowers the patients. And I think in developed markets, patients in many cases are ready to be empowered and not to have to wait long times to see the doctor, to refill a prescription, or just to check that their vitals are progressing correctly. So those are, I think, are spaces that are looking very exciting at the moment.
Okay, great. And I think you're right. Lots of opportunity in rare diseases when you look at the number of them. Each one is small, but there's a very large number of these diseases that remain untreated. And that's clearly, at a societal level, is creating still a lot of morbidity. Let me then ask Ulrika, same question. Are there areas in the therapeutic space that haven't been highlighted that are of interest to you? And the other topic that came up briefly in the opening remarks is more on the diagnostics side. And then I wonder if there's any opportunities there as well that you would like to highlight.
Yes, so I think Astrid actually mentioned personalized medicine in general, and we also look very positive on the segment of precision oncology, for example. I believe that oncology in general is having a huge medical need, and now with the pandemic we have felt the problem with a harsh disease for all, but I mean, oncology is still a devastating disease with a huge need. And looking at the technology now, the precision oncology and the possibility of treating, looking for specific mutations rather than organs, is an area I think will be growing the coming years. And we have seen a lot of progress the last couple of years. So that's an area. And then I also agree with Aitana regarding rare diseases. With the gene therapy possibilities coming now, it's fascinating and fantastic to see gene disorders that children are born with that this type of new technologies actually can treat. So we are looking, in general, we are looking at the medical need and the type of improvements specific molecules or assets can bring to patients.
And you mentioned some of the gene therapies. Would you consider gene editing to be at a similar stage, a similar technology, or is that a little bit less proven in your mind?
I think it's beginning maybe to be proven, but it's still some time to go. I think maybe the Nobel Prize last year gave some more light on the fact that gene editing is a future technology, but it's absolutely an area we follow closely. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So that's given, I think, an overview of top down, a lot of the ways that you're all finding areas in which you want to invest. And it's clearly a spread across the entire industry, from therapeutics right through to diagnostics and even into medtech, all getting at these same underlying structural trends. So then we come to the question of, okay, how do we actually choose the stocks? And maybe this is the most important part of it, is selecting the stocks and constructing a portfolio. So let me try to move on a little bit to how you guys like to choose stocks. Natalie, I'm going to start with you this time. And from a bottom-up perspective, when you first start looking at a company, what first gets your attention about a potential investment idea? Where do you start? What's the core for you?
The core certainly are the products. So how do what's their clinical specificity, and how does it compare to current treatment and competitors. And then, of course, it's getting into the literature, look at the results, clinical results, and talk to management. And second point, I would say it's management. How does the management think about the company, bring the product to the market, and what is their vision? And especially for me, over the last 20 years, what I've realized talking to management is what is really important for me is how does the management team react when something goes wrong, when a clinical trial does not work, when they have a negative answer from an FDA, or when markets are difficult. So what do they do? How do they think? And how do they operate and look forward? So, and then come to me, then certainly only come for me the valuation point of view, etc. So taken together, it's really the product and how does it compare to competition.
Okay, and an interesting comment you made there was about the I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Was a comment about when things go wrong. Now, as investors, as people following closely the biotech industry, there's one thing we can absolutely be certain of is that at some point things are going to go wrong. And we've probably all got a few war stories of when that has happened in our portfolios. So a very interesting observation. And maybe we'll come back to that in terms of how do you avoid these issues later on in the discussion. Ulrika, I wanted to ask you a similar question. How do you go about identifying a winning company when you're looking at a therapeutic company? What do you do? Anything differently to Natalie?
No, I think we start the same way. We look at first of all the medical need. Is this something that the society will pay for, and you know the patients and so on. And then we look at the clinical data and very thoroughly go through all data. And then the management, as Natalie mentioned, is very important. Coming further in the development process of the company, they need to have regulatory experience. Launch experience is very important, I believe. So over the course of the development of the company, it's important that they kind of adjust their management team in order to be prepared for what they are supposed to do. But the basis for our investment is always the innovation. How much better is it? How significant does it improve the patient's life? And or does it lower the cost, for example? Is it more effective? So that's the core of the investment.
Now, you mentioned something there that I think is increasingly on investors' minds, but was maybe less of a focus 10, 15 years ago, which is the cost and the budget impact. So less about the individual product price per se, but about the impact it can have across the totality of the healthcare budget.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that of increasing importance in your assessment as well?
I believe it is. But you know, if the improvement or if the effect of the treatment is very, you know, if it's unique, if it's improving life, then I think the willingness to pay a price for that is stronger. But if you have like a Me Too product that doesn't bring so much to the table, then you cannot expect that pricing is beneficiary for that type of product.
Yeah, understood. Astrid, if we move to you and maybe step back from the therapeutic space again and think more big picture, maybe medtech, maybe life sciences tools, is there anything you do differently when you approach these companies to a pure therapeutics companies? Because there's clearly a lot of focus on the therapeutic side of really getting stuck into the scientific detail, understanding the biology, reading the clinical trials. How do you tackle for the more medical product oriented companies?
Well, I mean, clearly it's a very different thing with the tools company. It's not a single product company. There are many companies I meet, and it's not even possible to discuss a specific product. It's sort of more on the macro situation in life sciences. But I do think that the tool sector as such is really an interesting way to sort of get in the back door into sort of all the exciting stuff that is going on in the life science industry. And they really sort of have a very good position because all these companies developing all these very cool technologies, gene therapy and so on, need also a lot of support from the from the tools companies. And also, I mean, I'm starting to find these more specialized niche tools companies that I find quite interesting too, that are sort of particularly sort of focused on some of these super exciting areas, such as the cell therapy area. So, I mean, there are companies that are sort of just focusing on cell counting or single cell distribution or something like that. And that's a sort of really good way to be exposed to these technologies, and you don't have to take the sort of clinical risk, or you don't have to pick a winner as such. So I think I mean, you will never have this huge upside of a sort of individual biotech stock, but you will oftentimes have a pretty good upside as well, and especially if this the particular technology has sort of a good outlook. And also the funding situation for the biotech industry has never been as good. I think last year was probably the record year in terms of funding, and as long as that stays, I mean, the situation for the tools companies is also pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I think tools has been a great place to be for at least the last 10 years, if you just look at that industry development. And some interesting points on risk management there as well. So that's I think is very important. Aitana, let me come back to you and ask you a development from this question. As someone who also invests in private companies, I think the points so far have been quite clear: products, management, in that order. Is it the same for you when you look at a private company? Is there anything else you need to think about that's distinct or that's different?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as a family office, we have very different investment horizons in mind when we're building the portfolio. So there is a balance of investment horizons. There are some overarching themes like oncology, fibrotic diseases, but they are also not set in stone. We can deviate from that. For sure, it needs to be. I think all the themes that were mentioned are super important. Products, bringing new solutions to patients. It doesn't need to be the most innovative technology, but maybe an improvement on a previous technology or something that improves the patient care in some way. Those things are always on our minds. And then, of course, if it's an earlier stage company, we look for something or we assume a certain type of risk. Management in that case is really, really crucial. The science needs to be there, or the technology, and for sure a management that has an idea on how to bring those products to the patients or to the market. Later on, if we invest in a company that it's a bit more advanced, then it's really useful to have a VC or a development partner that serves as external validation. And you know, once we go for the public companies, the products are almost as or let's say they can even eclipse management because they are much more developed at that point. And like Ulrika very well mentioned, it's also important that management, when we invest in private companies that are at different stages of development, we like to take a more active role. So there needs to be a good communication with management, and also a certain flexibility for management to understand and accept when they perhaps need to find roles that would help them in certain areas, or when they want to step down to a different role in the same company and hire a new CEO that has launching experience or business development experience, that sort of thing. So yeah, management is very important, products are very important, and external validation for certain company stages is also very important.
You make a very interesting point about the development of the management team through time as the company matures. The management team that you need to deliver a new product to market, you're saying, if I understand you, is not necessarily the same management team that you need to spin a product out of a university or a large pharma company. It's not necessarily the same management team that you need to plan a development program. There would be different skills, different experiences needed throughout the development, and you need to bring that in and make sure that you have everything in the company at the right time.
Yeah, and I mean, it can be that the original management stay in their same roles, simply looking for someone to support them where they still don't have the experience. I mean, there are cases like that, but very often, scientists that become entrepreneurs are still more comfortable working in developing the pipeline than working on the market access of a product.
Mm-hmm. And how about balance sheet strength and access to capital? Is that important in your process?
Yes, I mean, I also really appreciate it when companies don't come to look for funds that they need in 6 weeks if it's the first time we meet. And I mean, it needs to be a relationship that has been established for a while. They need to be very aware of when they are going to need the funds and how long it takes to explain this to investors. I mean, again, companies that are very mature, they might not know that, but they need to learn it. I mean, that's really, really important. And having other investors that are also supportive of the case, that's also invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's very, very clear. So let me come back to something that Astrid and Ulrika both mentioned, which is managing risk in the portfolio. We all would love to have the best performing life sciences investment, but we also have to accept that not all of our investments are going to be winners, as much as we try to find them. So how do you manage risk within your portfolio? And maybe I'll start with Astrid then for that question.
Well, I guess I probably alluded to a little bit. I mean, I have a pretty broad scope in my portfolio. So I have both large companies and small companies and in various subsectors. So just by doing that, I think I have a little bit more sort of calmer risk situation. And of course, I mean, biotech is, I do invest in smaller biotech companies too. And typically I would start with a relatively small position before, until I get to know the company a little bit more. Maybe they would sort of generate some data and you get more confident over time. And as you said before, you just also have to accept that, sometimes things go against you. I mean, all clinical trials don't work, and that's the life of biotech, simply. Yeah. And so you have to spread your bets, I guess, as well.
And maybe to Ulrika, the same question, because you're perhaps more focused on the smaller companies and less able, therefore, to diversify into large companies. If you focus on the smaller companies, how do you manage that risk in your portfolio?
So the existing fund that we manage now does have both segments. So it's a fund with everything from small cap to large cap. So in that fund, we are absolutely able to invest in the larger pharma and larger biotechs, and we do. But if you look at the small mid cap segment that we have most focus on, it's absolutely essential, I believe, to diversify, to risk diversify, and to keep all the positions in a well controlled and a limited size, because it's also a beauty of the biotech sector, I believe, that stock can go up many times, but you still have just 100% down, to say so. But actually, because I mean, we normally limit our small mid cap positions to up to 3% of the portfolio, and people can ask, but do you really get significant return from that? Yes, we do, and we have seen that now for 5 years, that we have a very disciplined risk diversification. But since those stocks, if you select the good ones, you can go many times up. So by doing that, you kind of limit your downside, and you still keep absolute opportunity to access return. Just one comment on now, when we launch the biotech, pure biotech fund, then we won't be able to have a large pharma proportion, but we will still be very disciplined in terms of risk diversification and keeping each position controlled, so you don't risk the drawdown of binary events. And I believe that's essential in biotech to risk diversify.
Yeah, I think it's as you say, it's a sector where failures are inevitable, and managing those failures, both from a management perspective, as was highlighted earlier, and from a portfolio perspective, is absolutely critical. So I think that's a very, very sensible comment. Natalie, an extension of that question would be, is there something that would make you walk away completely? Something that would just put you right off, a red flag for a company at all?
Certainly, a red flag is if we realize that the company has really less than 1 year cash. That's certainly a bit a problem, especially the biotech names, because as you know, a biotech to develop a product, it needs a long time, but it also needs a lot of capital. And if as a management you are really short on cash and you should run the trials or finish the trials or add some trials, and you are constrained by that, that's a problem also for the development of the product, and you're going to use some cuts in the development. So that's certainly less than 1 year cash is for me really a problem.
Yeah, I think that
it's unfortunate very often because we saw also in the last 2 years a lot of interesting small cap names, very interesting technology. They are already maybe in the clinic and they had early results, but they especially it was in 2019, not 2020. They were not capable of reaching new capital, and that was a problem for me personally to invest.
Yeah, I think it's the same issue that Aitana was highlighting before, is that if the balance sheet isn't going to last you to get to the next milestone, essentially in a private investment world, then you've got a problem, and you want to try to avoid that problem. Aitana, anything you would add to that?
No. I mean, I agree. I mean, sometimes companies with a shortage in the balance sheet might represent an opportunity, but it's a very risky opportunity if, like Natalie said, if they don't manage to convince investors that this is a great opportunity. I mean, if they are struggling to find people that want to get involved in the case, then they waste a lot of time trying to raise those funds and don't have the time to develop the projects as they should.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So we've heard quite a lot about coming from the top down, finding a way into the sector, where specifically some of our guests find the most exciting opportunities, and they've all talked through a little bit about their approach, some of their experiences investing in the sector, and I for one have found it really, really interesting. So thank you very much. I think in order to summarize a little bit what we've heard, I would probably draw out three themes from what the panelists have spoken about. Firstly, products are key. That's quite clear. And that means innovation. And that innovation can be either treating a disease that wasn't previously treatable, or it can be simply faster, better, cheaper ways to do things. We heard a lot about the budget impact. And that's maybe a change compared to 10, 15 years ago, when any new product that you could bring to market could be successful. There's a lot more focus now on the financial side, on the commercialization, market access. And I think that's a change that's worth highlighting. The cost of healthcare has come under more scrutiny. Secondly, we've heard it very, very clearly from all the panelists, management matters. You've got to have the right experience, you've got to have the right people at the right stage of development for the company, and that will evolve. There's various ways to manage it, but to look to see the evolution of management, bringing the skills in that you need for the next step in the company's development. That seems to be the second point. And then thirdly, finally, capital, access to capital, careful management of capital, especially for the smaller companies at earlier stages of development. If we look around right now, it's very clear that the biotech capital markets are open, but I think our experience tells us that's not always going to be the case. So the message I got very strongly from our panelists was, to invest in a company, you need to believe that the management has a plan to make sure they have the capital in place when they're going to need it. So with that, I think I'll conclude our discussion. That means thank you very much once more to our four panelists. Thank you for watching, and have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lachlan, and the speakers for this very interesting first panel discussion. Next panel is more from the perspective of building a successful life science company, and is moderated by Patrick Frey, CEO and founder of Venture Valuation. So, Patrick, please go ahead.
Good. Hello, everybody. And thank you, Hampus, for having us. And thank you, the Swiss Nordic Bio team, for this opportunity. I'm happy to have three distinct panelists with me today, talking about a very interesting topic. We have Ingrid Thailand from Hayden Ventures, Tommy Leitonen from Blueprint Genetics, and Felicia Richter from Vator Securities. And we will be talking about life science companies and from startups to unicorn, see what it takes. So I think to start, we will have each of the panelists introduce themselves quickly, and then we can talk about that interesting topic. So maybe Ingrid, can we start with you? Just a few words about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Patrick. My name is Ingrid Tegland Akai. I'm founder and managing partner of Hayden Ventures, which is a European life science VC firm with offices in Oslo and Stockholm. And we have a particular focus on the Nordic region. We have roughly 85 million euros under management in our first fund, and we have a team of about 12 people. We invest across the life science sector, including pharma, biotech, medtech, diagnostics, and digital health. My background is from clinical medicine, in particular internal medicine and gastrointestinal surgery, and I spent the last 10 plus years in venture capital.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much. Felicia, maybe you, a few words about the company and the background?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Patrick. So my name is Felicia Richter. I am a healthcare or life science equity analyst at Vator Securities. And I have a scientific background and have previously worked in venture capital, holding various board positions in small life science companies, both biotech and medtech.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yes. And Tommy, your background, a few words.
Thank you, Patrick. So hello, everybody, also on my behalf. So my name is Tommy Leitonen. I'm a co-founder, CEO of a company called Blueprint Genetics. We're a clinical genetic testing company based in Helsinki. The business is split between Europe and North America, and I think today, majority of our business already is in North America. And Blueprint was acquired by Quest Diagnostics about a year ago. So today I have another hat as Vice President, General Manager of what's called Specialty Genetics business of Quest, running that business and clinical franchise. Thank you.
Great. So we have different backgrounds. I think that's great to talk about, what it takes from a startup to become a unicorn. So I think we just jump in and see what does it take? What are the ingredients that are necessary to bring a company from a startup, from the idea to really become a unicorn, right? A unicorn having a billion evaluation, right? And that's something that not so many companies can achieve. But so the first question, maybe, Tommy, if I just stay with you, what does it take from a company perspective, to get to such a level from your perspective?
Well, I think there's a lot of common wisdom around that, but if we, from my perspective, the obvious ones would be, I think first, a large market. I think it's like it kind of starts from there, because you have to be able to scale quite tremendously, and if you don't have a large market, I think it's hard to scale because it gets so fragmented, and I think if you have that. Of course, scalability in like everything that you do, so processes. And if you look at Blueprint, for example, we have a pretty broad portfolio. We run more than 200 tests, and we cover 14 different medical specialties, ranging from neurology to ear, nose, throat, and ophthalmology and pulmonology, and all those different medical specialties. So things like that create some fragmentation. I think that's a bit like off from the scalability of the business. So there's a lot of testing and diagnostics businesses out there who would just have like one test, not 200 tests. And I think those are very attractive from scalability perspective, that you have that just one test and you can focus on that and just have everything in place for that one one test instead of running hundreds of different tests, which creates fragmentation. And maybe the third from kind of building company perspective would be culture. So that I think, the organization needs to scale, and that requires a whole lot of thinking and right kind of things in place for the organization. And I think it starts from culture and kind of comes from there. So those would be the three first things that come across.
Okay, that's interesting. So scalability, large markets, and the culture. I think maybe Felicia, from your side, when you analyze companies, and do you see that as well? Are these the ingredients that you're looking for? Investing or advising companies or people to invest, or what would you see from your perspective? What are the ingredients to make a unicorn?
So definitely, and what Tommy mentioned are some of the parameters that we look at. But speaking from a more broad perspective, I'd say we're looking, and I think that having a very clear and outspoken 5-year vision with a systematic approach, how to get there or achieve your goal, your vision, is very important, and because that addresses the important enablers along the development, the commercialization that lowers risk and increases probability of success. And having that in place, having that idea clearly mapped early on builds credibility towards investors. And these are some of the type of things that I usually work with, trying to map out and understand and categorize. So for instance, in drug development, that would be to manage the biological and clinical development risk, meaning early on setting up the right clinical trial design with the relevant key endpoints. And for instance, in medtech, that would be managing commercial risk. For instance, seeking opportunities to accelerate time to meaningful revenues. And that could be by organic growth or accelerating that pathway through a buy and build strategy.
Okay, so that's very interesting. The vision on one side, and the other side is to manage risk, right? So I think that's very interesting points. And I guess the vision and the idea communicating to investors also has to do, because at the end, a unicorn you're not making yourself. You have investors making your unicorn, right? So you have to communicate. So maybe Ingrid, from your side, how does that work when you work with startup companies? Do you see that this vision as an important part, or what other factors is from an investor's perspective important?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Looking at investment opportunities, like how to build a unicorn. That's really the $1 million or perhaps $1 billion questions for us. To squeeze in a bad joke there. It's not sort of a standard way, I would say, and everybody would follow the template. But I fully agree with Tommy and Felicia, the things that they brought up. The market potential has to be there. You can't build something incredibly valuable if the market is not there. So that's absolutely key. And then the other thing is, of course, the people to drive this growth. The team is absolutely essential. Not only do they have to be highly competent, but they also have to have an extremely strong drive, a hunger for success, and execution power. So that's something that needs to be inherent in the team, and also being able to scale the team and being able to recruit and have new people join your team. So I think that goes back to what Tom is talking about, sort of the culture. Creating a sort of a winning culture is essential. And then, from an investor perspective, the access to the right type of funding for that type of growth. Being able to sell the story and convince the right type of investors to join to get sufficient capital for this high growth. And this also goes back to sort of the ambition of the team. What type of investors do you want to work with? Because obviously, professional investors, venture investors, they're quite demanding, people to work with. They're all sort of very focused on fast pace and and high growth. And that's great if you want to be on that track, but not every entrepreneur wants to be on that track. There is sort of also a possibility for a slower path and less ambitious growth. So that's something that each team, each entrepreneur needs to think carefully about. And then obviously you need to have flexibility to be agile, because the situation will change and you need to be able to adapt to the situation and change as it goes. So I think those are the things that contribute to growing a unicorn.
So these are good points of as an entrepreneur. So the success factors of an entrepreneur. So to develop a unicorn, at the end it comes back to a lot also from the team and from the people. So maybe from your perspectives, where do you see, what are the key ingredients? So being agile is one of the things. Being hungry, that's what Ingrid mentioned. Tommy, what do you see? And Felicia, from your side, what are the key ingredients in terms of the team, and what can entrepreneurs do maybe in terms of building these teams, to set up the company for success? I don't know, Tommy, what from your perspective, what are the key aspects here?
Well, I think Ingrid already mentioned a number of good, sort of important things. I think first of all, if we're thinking about healthcare and life sciences, I think there's a need for a bit broader skill set than what you see in some of the other sort of tech growth areas, since you do need clinical expertise, scientific expertise, typically both involved in the team on a kind of a founder level. But I think it is the ability to tell the story, to build the narrative and to build it from from the either patient or clinician perspective, or from the perspective of how healthcare is changing. I think that kind of starts the a lot of things when you're able to start building a brand and building a narrative for the whole business and the whole funding narrative and all of that. Then for sure you need the commercial narrative, which kind of trickles down from that. So you need it's kind of obvious, but a company needs great commercial leaders who are able to tell the story. But I think it's from in healthcare, life sciences, it's a bit of a broader skill set, because you have to be able to align clinical mindset, scientific mindset, commercial mindset, and then and align all of that under a one vision that the whole leadership is able to tell and repeat.
How did you choose your team when you built the company? How did you pick the right people, that at the end carried and worked with you on this vision?
Well, retrospectively, it's always easy to write history in a very determined manner, and so that it's top down, that this is how we did it. We planned and designed everything from the get-go. But really, I think a lot of these team dynamics are built and born, out of serendipity. So that it's lucky coincidences that certain people get together, and the hiring is I think. It's easy to afterwards find the logics of how things happened, but I think it is a lot about serendipity. In Blueprint's case, I joined a team of 3 scientists who had just finished their postdocs in Stanford and UCSF, and one of them came up with the technology that Blueprint's early business was built on, and the 2 others were clinicians who understood the clinical perspective of how to use the technology, and I think they were looking for somebody who has a more commercial experience and mindset, and that's how I got involved. But it was very far from very in a determined manner choosing something. But I think these are lucky coincidences when companies are born, so that you're able to somehow get a group of people with complementary skill sets together. But I think of course, after the first phases, then you are more, you're able to plan more, and you are more determined, so that you bring in commercial expertise or certain market expertise. For example, for us in the North American market and all that. But the early part is quite serendipitous, I need to say, at least from my experience.
That's good. So Felicia, when you look at teams and you look at the different backgrounds of the people when you analyze a company, or is that important that you have people with commercial backgrounds and people with the scientific background, and how important is that when you look at companies, or are there other factors you would include in the analysis?
Definitely. I mean, of course, you look at a track record and the composition of different types of skills. And I think when meeting with a company, it's also trying to understand how efficient they are in creating opportunities and being adaptive to their surrounding circumstances. Successful entrepreneurs are they see opportunities arise. I mean, even in a pandemic. And I think that as public companies, they have their market cap dynamics to enjoy, and when private companies do not have that same opportunities. But I think that also one opportunity that is not seen as much in life science companies when it comes to smaller ones is the buy and build strategy, so driving a multiple expansion. And that is a strategy that is much more frequent to a greater extent in, for example, gaming companies in the gaming sector. And I think that it's particularly relevant now to look at these type of opportunities to see what you can do to mitigate the fact that you have extended timelines. Perhaps you have a product in development or in early commercial stage, and your commercial agreements are several years ahead from actually materializing and producing meaningful revenues. You have to do something in parallel to your proprietary development to have a stimulating news flow and avoid a sliding stock.
Mm. Okay,
and thereby adding to that, building shareholder value so you can actually enable other opportunities in the company.
Okay, that's an interesting point, that the buy and build. I don't know, from Ingrid's perspective, when you build companies or when you help, invest in companies, is that a strategy where you say, this is something, that we want to do? We provide certain capital for buy and build, or is it different for the different sectors? For medtech, it might be different from health tech. How does that work from an investor's perspective?
Yeah, it's not something we do often. It's not part of the core strategy, but I think as said, one has to be agile, one has to be opportunistic. So when the right opportunities arise, you have to be able to see them and act on them. So we're not sort of exclude strategies like that at all. I just want to add something also to discussion on the team here, and I think what Felicia talked about earlier, the risk management, of running clinical trials and other strategies. That also very much goes back to the team. How do you make sure that you run the clinical trials? I think the securest way of doing that is to have people come and design these studies who have a lot of experience in that space. And that is sort of part of building the right team and being able to recruit and get the right people in at the right point in time. And also from the founder's perspective, also having the courage and the confidence to do that, to bring in people who know better what to do in the next stages, and accepting, giving away a little bit of the power and trusting that people have complementary skills that you as a founder might not have. So that sort of needs to come together.
So that takes certain personality to be able to bring in somebody who knows more than yourself, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, Tommy, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree very much with Ingrid on that, and I think I just add that I think Blueprint has always, for example, had the privilege of having very clear competition, so that we've had very clear direct competitors who were there before us, and I think it makes things very easy in a lot of ways, because it clarifies a whole lot of things, and it means also that there are people who have extremely relevant experience and way more than you do yourself. And for hiring, if you have a compelling thing going on, that there's a kind of new company with certain energy and momentum, it's great if there is direct competition from whom you can hire, and because you can just learn what you would have needed 3 or 4 years to understand. You can learn that in months. So it's one of the good things of having very direct and clear competition.
You don't always have to reinvent the wheel.
Sorry?
You don't always have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's a very relevant feedback also for the companies and for entrepreneurs, that you don't have to do everything yourself, but you can get the expertise, and you have to be able to trust yourself and get people that can bring the company forward, right? To bring to such a next level. Now, one of the topics, and that's a bit, talking about a bit different cultures, and maybe, Tommy, you mentioned the US, that's scalable, and you do a lot of business there. In the US, you have maybe a bit more this drive to take risk and to have a bigger market. But on the other side, there's a lot of opportunities in Europe as well. So what can we do? Can a unicorn be built in Europe, or is it just something that is more for the US? Or what does it take to have a unicorn in Europe? And how can you attract maybe the right people? And is it the right place? I don't know, kind of Europe versus the US, and looking also at Asia, or is that the place where we have unicorns in the future?
Yeah, and I think it's like kind of building a unicorn company of a certain market value. I think it's a kind of an end result or a consequence of a certain vision, and in a way not the other way around. So that the vision is to build a unicorn, and then you have to think what to do in order to achieve that. I think it's kind of the other way around, so that you have a vision, and it might end up in an end result where you have a unicorn in your hand or you don't. But I think when you think about the vision itself, it of course boils down a whole lot to the product and the business and the kind of the team, what the team wants and what the team is best capable of. But I think it might be hard for somebody to have, or a small team to have, a super global strategy so that you start going everywhere. But I think in a space like healthcare, especially diagnostics, there's kind of I think you almost need to try to find a reason not to go to the US or not to go to Asia from Europe, instead of I think it's not an obvious conclusion that why would we only stay in Europe, and because there are large single markets out there where you can scale more efficiently than what you can in Europe, which is way more fragmented, especially in healthcare, because countries have a whole lot of national rigidities in healthcare, which is very understandable. But there are large single markets outside Europe, and even if you don't decide to go there, I think it's a decision on its own not to do something. So that and it should probably be a key part of the vision and the strategy. And for Blueprint, it turned out to be the US market. And I think, if we think about Blueprint's business to date, US has been a growth driver for us for the past years. And I think it will only be that, in a stronger sense for the next, during the next years. So once you sort of build the foundation of the business, and you're able to start that scaling that was mentioned in the early part, it is quite rewarding to have a single market approach that's large, so that you don't need to deal with restrictions and rigidities all the time. Of course, in the US you have states, and there's a whole lot of regulation here and there, but still, from commercial perspective, look at the teams, commercial teams. It's quite scalable and unified as a market. So I think it's almost the other way around, so that you have to have a reason not to go somewhere where you have a large single market access.
So for Felicia, how important is the geographical focus of a company when you do the analysis and looking at successful companies? Is that how key is that? And can a company in Europe become a unicorn if they focus on the European market, or do they have to go beyond?
So I think, generally speaking, it's important to have a global, international focus, especially addressing the U.S. market, because it is the single most important one often when it comes to drug development and medtech. So planning and addressing all important stakeholders in that market early on is important. And I think that the European landscape, life science landscape, is evolving. I mean, of course, it is different when comparing funding and the ecosystem for the innovation capital. But I think that companies like BioNTech, Babylon Health, that are actually successful in attracting, for instance, U.S. investors, they provide, their experience can be leveraged by other companies. So we can hopefully see those success stories more in the future.
And Ingrid, from your side, geographical focus, your companies today, are they mainly European focused or global? How does that look like from your side? And how important is that? Do you drive them to have an international strategy?
Yeah, we do. I mean, our companies develop products for a global market. I say global, but ultimately it is primarily the Western world, so Europe and North America. I absolutely think Asia is growing in importance. However, US is still sort of the most important single healthcare market. I've yet to see a company who's chosen another market instead of US and being successful with that. So I think it's nevertheless US source is still core for the products of the companies that we have. So yes, our companies have that strategy, and that's something we very strongly encourage. And when it comes to developing European unicorns, yeah, I think obviously US is leading that space. Asia is already on the tech side way beyond Europe when it comes to developing unicorns. I think that Europe has, absolutely that potential. Scientific foundation is, at least on par with what we see anywhere else in the world, no doubt. So the potential is absolutely there in Europe. The bottlenecks are a couple of things. One thing is obviously, as already mentioned here, the funding, getting access to the amount of funding that's needed for fast and efficient growth. That is still a bottleneck. We do see funding rounds increasing in Europe, and the type of rounds that we see here versus US is the difference is getting smaller, but nevertheless there is definitely still a difference there. And the other thing is going back to the team, just accessing that talent that we've talked about previously here. It's still easier in US because you have a broader foundation, you have more of a base of people to select from when you're building that team. So those are sort of still the bottlenecks, but this is definitely evolving, and that will continue to evolve in the future. So I think we are definitely on the right path to extract and use the potential that we have here.
So I think funding, that's a topic, to maybe, and I think I absolutely agree, getting access to funding is key at the end of the day. If you want to build a successful company and you want to internationalize. So what would you recommend, from your different perspectives, companies, who believe they have the right team, they have the right product, the right, market scalability, but where do they go for the funding? They need a sufficient amount of capital. Where do they go geographically? And then also in terms of who are the investors? Do we go to public market? Is it private? Is it family offices? Is it VCs? What would you recommend companies look at, to really, if you want to really make it big and need sufficient capital? What's the solution here?
I think Ingrid should start.
Completely unbiased, I would suggest venture capital. Going back to what we talked about previously, it really depends on what is your ambition, what you want to achieve. And I think if you want to, achieve the highest growth and become as big as possible, as fast as possible, then I professional investors, it's probably the best to help you with that. Venture capital firms like us and others, we like to invest in syndicates, which means that we often create and help create rounds that are substantially larger than the capital that we contribute with, and we're used to working with high growth companies. So we're part of that process, and we try to step in and help as much as we can doing that.
And your co-investors, are they then located? Do you go to the US to find co-investors, or you
sometimes,
stay in Europe?
Yeah, sometimes. It very much depends on the company and the stage. But usually in the earlier stages, you get a good sort of local basis for your investor. And then you sort of grow when the rounds get bigger and more ambitious.
Yeah. And I would support the thinking in the geographical side. So I mean, of course, the funding structure depends so much on the stage of the business. It's very different if it's seed or pre-seed, or if you're scaling somewhere or down the line. But I think, for example, if you're aspiring the U.S. market, there's a great help. I think if you look at VC funds today, I think it's hard to find a fund that doesn't genuinely try to help the business to grow with experience and connections and all of that. And for a European company to aspire the US market, there's just so many things that need to get done, and so many connections to be made and discussions to be held, that any help in the networking part is very welcome. So I think it's really great if you can for your Series A, you can hit a syndicate that has a US dimension in it. I think it's very helpful for the market expansion, or Asia for that matter, if that's the chosen strategy and aspiration. Then on the other hand, finding a Asian VC fund to join the syndicate. But I think it's just a great way to develop the business also.
Okay, that's good. And Felicia, from your side, is it the public market that at the end that would also contribute, or where do you see which company should go, public or stay private? It's probably a discussion for a whole other panel. But from your perspective, when should companies move towards a public side and get money from the public market?
Very difficult to answer. I don't know if there's a specific answer that applies to all companies, but I mean, at some point, definitely, whether public or private, the ambition must be to build an institutional or professional ownership base, and besides that, bringing sustainable funding and lowering the financial risk going forward in the development. Of course, that also gives access to a whole different network and competence that is important to support the company along it as it progresses.
Okay. Now maybe just looking at the type in terms of the industries, looking at unicorns and building unicorns. Obviously, in tech, we heard that before. In tech, you have now more and more unicorns, also in Asia. Now, if we look at digital health, is that something where we can see more opportunities to create these successful and bigger companies? Also, because maybe the scalability is easier and you're faster to market. Do you see this development? And Ingrid, do you invest in that particular space? And because you see that faster growth and possibility for unicorns in that space.
Yeah, we invest in that space. We think it's a very exciting space, and I would say yes, there is definitely a potential for unicorns there, but it's not an easy space. I think it has become clear over the last years. I mean, there's been many years of evolving this space that the healthcare system is a conservative sector, right? Selling into hospitals is not the same as selling into consumer. I think that's something that a few investors have painfully become aware of. So I think we have to still be a bit patient but it's definitely coming. I think last year, 2020, with COVID, is something that has accelerated this process. So hopefully it will go a bit faster in the future, and we are seeing signs of that. But it's not something that has rolled out quickly so far.
Tommy or Felicia, from your side, digital health, is that something that you see, and what are the drivers there in this industry? I mean, do you see it the same way? Is it maybe coming more from Asia, that we have companies coming from Asia that develop there and then roll out in the global market, or any?
Well, at least from my perspective, I think it's quite easy to agree that digitalization of healthcare is a mega trend, and digitalization overall, and software eating the world and all that. So, but I think it's probably good not to lose focus on the clinical utility or clinical benefits of anything. I mean, if we look at diagnostics business, for sure it's being digitalized all the time more and more, but there is a kind of underlying clinical driver. So why things are being developed and how they develop. And I can relate to Ingrid's words around the inertia quite easily from our experiences. So HIPAA compliance, altogether running a QMS, or kind of living the daily life of a clinician, these are things that are just important to take into aspect when trying to understand how to digitalize different things.
Good. Felicia, I don't know. Or the other point is the COVID. How does that impact the whole industry? Right? Is it now? Does it drive now to have more unicorns because we have a concentration of successful companies, and or does it drive more money now into the industry, and so allow to have more unicorns? How do you see the impact of COVID in this industry?
So I think that it has definitely transitioned or catalyzed certain sustainable trends. For instance, moving to a patient care. And I think that at the end of the day, it all has to do with rapid adaptation. So in a few years, it will have acted as a catalyst for companies that are able to adapt fast, and probably companies that have not been able to capture certain opportunities in these environments will probably lag a bit behind.
Ingrid or Tommy, in terms of the COVID impact?
Yeah, I think just looking at the companies, our portfolio, the short-term effect has been challenging for many companies because of the delays of clinical trials. That's called the core business, is running clinical trials, and that has in many cases been very challenging last year. That's sort of the short-term impact, but the long-term effect, we can definitely see that there's a growing need and a growing understanding for the need of innovation in the healthcare sector. So this is definitely something that will benefit the healthcare sector in the mid to long term. Just the stronger focus, I think, inflow of capital and an acceleration of innovation.
Okay. Tommy, from your side?
No, I think it's easy to agree on that kind of a whole lot of challenges short term, but for sure I'm at least optimistic on the kind of long term benefits. So I think it's like hopefully we at least are able to understand the significance of being able to consolidate data and study vast amounts of data in a flexible manner, and acceptance of new scientific approaches and regulatory sort of, I don't know what the right word would be, but smart regulatory approach. So not too rigid, not too loose, and but being just able to challenge certain legacy structures that have been in place. I think that would count as a long-term benefit, but And when there's change, there's opportunity. But of course, it would be hard to say that net this is like a great thing. But long term, I'm optimistic that there's good things coming out of all this. And it's not trivial that COVID is. I think at least somebody mentioned that by any measure, the most studied disease to date. And I think from large efforts like that, always things come out that benefit the industry.
Mm-hmm. That's positive words, so that's good. And I think I also see it. I mean, definitely it has a positive impact, right? Even though in the short term it was hurting a lot of companies. Now, the other question, talking about unicorns and maybe provocative, that do we need unicorns at all, right? So everybody is trying to build unicorns and looking at, get there. But at the end, wouldn't it be better to have a lot of smaller companies? You have a risk diversification from a society perspective. How do you see that? Do we need unicorns, or is it sufficient to have just successful companies?
Yeah, I think that is a very good question, and just thinking about it from our perspective, generating return for our investors, mathematically it doesn't matter if that's from a large company, a large exit, or from several smaller exits. And from a return perspective, the numbers might not make a difference. However, but what we're seeing is that big unicorns, and the tech sector is demonstrating this all the time, is amazing for the branding of the sector, and that's something that our sector could benefit from. We see now that from a venture capital side, much more capital is flowing into tech VC funds and investing into tech, and I think a few of the highly branded life science unicorns could definitely help driving that change in the life science sector as well. So I think definitely that unicorns in the life science sector would be great for all of us.
Felicia, do you see that as well? That these unicorns help to attract investors, that they will get a focus on this sector that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have, and it allows to raise more money for companies?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. They are attractive, but I also think that the concept of a unicorn, it shouldn't be the only focus. So there's somewhat of a romantic idea of unicorns at the ultimate end game, and as Ingrid said, it has probably not so much to do always with the return on investments. And when looking at that, there are other company creatures that are just as attractive. For instance, dragons.
Mm-hmm. Good. Tommy, I don't know, from your perspective, I mean, is the company on the track to become a unicorn? Is that the key at the end? That's the end game, or?
Blueprint was already sold, so it's already kind of past that. But I think I think that the investor perspective is maybe more relevant and to this. But if I try to kind of think about the entrepreneur perspective, the fact is that it's not a choice that you make in a way. It's not how you kind of guide thinking or the business or the whole idea. It's not a choice that you make that, I think we should have 680 million as the right sort of market cap and then stop there. If you go and ask startup teams, of course, everybody wants to, build $1 billion business and are kind of have this, the whole answer ready, why the market is big and all of that. But to the original question, whether you need it, I think it's, I don't know, but I think that we do need teams that aspire to make a big impact and teams that aspire to make something meaningful and create something meaningful. And whether it becomes a unicorn or not, I mean, history will tell, but it's not that much of a choice that you make in your entrepreneurial journey. But you do make a choice of how ambitious you are. And I think, what the world needs is ambitious teams trying to make a very meaningful impact into something in healthcare.
So at the end, it comes back to having a vision to go somewhere and not necessarily a number that you want to aim for. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Exactly.
So I think in terms of time, we are getting towards the end. And what I'd like to have maybe from your side, a recommendation. What do you recommend entrepreneurs, for them to be successful? It doesn't have to be become a unicorn, but for them, what is your personal recommendation from your experience? Like the one thing you would say, okay, this is something that I think is very important for entrepreneurs to know. What would you recommend? I don't know, Ingrid, when can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. I would say sort of the top 3 things is, be flexible. Always look for the right team members to join your team and look for the right investors.
Perfect, thank you. Tommy, from your experience, the recommendations for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think it's kind of safe to say that there's never been a better point of time to start a new company. So on the other hand, crisis there's a proverb that when there's a crisis, it's when everybody's going for something safe, it's good to start building new companies. But I think the more important piece is that the European tech ecosystem, if you will, or just the whole network of people with history and experience and people who are able to fund businesses either through as being angels or through VC funds. I don't think the setup has ever been this great and it's obvious with the numbers as well. It has never had this much of momentum. So I think it's just a great time to be in Europe and building a new tech startup.
So basically take the risk and go for it. So that's good. Felicia, your recommendations to companies or to entrepreneurs, what they should do to be successful?
Yeah, so I will actually finish with what I started with. So have a very clear and outspoken vision. I think it's key to be able to take the right direction early on, to risk mitigate, to get investors on board on your vision, and to be able to actually plan your capital raises so that you can advance and build a pipeline rather than focusing on a single asset.
Okay, great. So I think that's great recommendations for companies. I hope that is helpful to the participants of the conference, to build the successful companies in Europe with the global vision. Well, thanks very much to the panelists and thanks for the organizer. And I wish everybody a successful conference. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, panel speakers, for this very interesting discussion. Now we invite Fabian Gerber, Senior Relationship Manager at SIX, and SIX has been with us for a long time at Swiss Nordic Bio, so we're very happy for that. Welcome, Fabian.
Well, good morning and welcome to my presentation about the biotech sector on the Swiss Stock Exchange. My name is Fabian Gerber and I work as a relationship manager within the primary markets division of the Swiss Stock Exchange. For us, the Swiss Stock Exchange, it's a great honor and pleasure to be the main sponsor again of this event and hopefully for many years to come. It's nothing new that Switzerland has a lot in common with the Nordic countries, and even this front picture here that you can see on the slide could have been taken just as well in Norway or Iceland somewhere. Certainly, the similarities with Sweden are well known, and keeping the two countries apart is always a challenge for many people. On closer inspection, this challenge is also, I would say, understandable because both countries play excellent ice hockey, but only average football. In tennis, Sweden was and Switzerland still is a world power. And there are also great similarities in the economy. Both countries have quite a well-known have quite a few well-known large corporations, and with ABB, even a joint tech company which is listed both in Stockholm and Zurich. But where Sweden generally has like a preponderance of traditional industrial companies, Switzerland has a stronger pharmaceutical industry. And this strong pharmaceutical sector that we have in Switzerland provides the basis for a fruitful environment and one of the most dynamic life science ecosystems worldwide, with long-standing interactions between the well-established Swiss pharma, bio and medtech companies, investors, and Switzerland's financial institutions. On this graphic here, you can see Switzerland and its different clusters, which is spread all over the country. The high density of biotech companies and investors in Switzerland is probably unique in the world. It's growing every year and proves to be a magnet for fresh capital and investments. Over 15,000 people are employed in the sector in Switzerland, and the importance for the country is underpinned by experts of pharmaceutical and biotech products, which account for around 40% of the total Swiss export volume. So, unsurprisingly, the life science sector is therefore also the most important sector on the Swiss Stock Exchange, which you can see here on the right of this slide, and represents more than a third of the European life science market capitalization. The driver for this clear lead are, of course, mainly the well-known global pharmaceutical companies we all know, like Novartis and Roche, and as well the world's largest contract manufacturer for this sector, for this industry, Lonza, which give us here a clear lead in Europe. But you can also see that Euronext, LSE, and OMX, Nasdaq OMX are about the same level, and this has been for many years now like this. So as I already said, Roche, Novartis, and Lonza, these three companies form the basis for a well-diversified peer group whose great attractiveness extends far beyond the borders of Switzerland. And last year, the companies that you see on the left were especially in the focus of the media and investors. So these companies have benefited from high visibility among investors and the media also in previous years, but 2020 definitely was a special year in many ways, and rarely before has so much been written about the sector as last year. Of the total announcements, consisting of studies, applications for approval and trial results, etc., made by biotech companies listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange, over 80% or 84% had a positive impact on the company's share price, which increased by almost 10% on average on the day of the announcement. And compared to 2019, their trading volumes rose sharply by 177%. And with this, also the free float market cap of all the listed biotech companies went up by 30% just within 12 months. This is something we have not seen on this scale for a very long time here, and or maybe if ever. Yeah, exactly. You see on the next slide also the successful capital increases which were carried out last year, and this is also due to the high level of interest that these capital increases could have been carried out that successful. In these times of uncertainty and high market volatility, public markets took on a decisive role and ensured companies ongoing access to capital. Last year, companies listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange raised a total of 5.7 billion in fresh equity capital aimed at driving growth or strengthening their capital structure. In this respect, 2020 was as well one of the most active years ever on the Swiss Stock Exchange, and there were also several biotech companies being involved. Most notable amongst these were the following transactions you can see here in this table, whereas Idorsia and Molecular Partners clearly stand out due to their size and great investor interest they both attracted in and outside Switzerland. So this also demonstrates the Swiss capital markets' high ability to satisfy the funding needs of biotech companies, even in difficult times, and the visibility 6 listed biotech companies also enjoy in the US or other countries. On this slide, you can see the price earning ratios of the life science sectors here in Europe and in Switzerland. All the positive news flow also had an impact on the company's valuations, and accordingly, the life science companies on the Swiss Stock Exchange achieved attractive valuations as per end of 2020. In this respect, they lead the following table here of price earning ratios and leave their European peers behind. However, the companies listed in the OMX index also achieved attractive valuations and rank second. And yeah, that's what I would call a good omen for the Swiss Nordic Bio 2021. Yeah, maybe to conclude my presentation, I would like to share with you the following chart of the SXI BioMedTech Index to reflect the high importance of the life science sector on the Swiss Stock Exchange. This special index was created almost 20 years ago. And of the last biotech listings we had on our exchange, Idorsia, Polyfor, and Obsiva have made it straight into this exclusive selection of biotech and medtech companies on the Swiss Stock Exchange. And as you can see here on this chart, since July 2015, the index constantly outperforms both the Swiss Performance Index, which represents the Swiss market as a whole, and Nasdaq Biotechnology. And also last year in 2020, his annual performance was at plus 17%, or almost 14% above the SPI, the Swiss Performance Index. This is also because of his fast recovery he had after the worldwide stock markets crashed in the wake of the COVID pandemic in March, and certainly also evidence of the high resilience of this sector. Yeah, and with this slide, I have reached the end of my short presentation about the biotech sector on the Swiss Stock Exchange, and thank you for your time and your interest. There are many reasons to do an IPO in Europe. The Swiss Stock Exchange, with its strong ecosystem as seen, offers an excellent starting position for a successful going public, and is certainly a leading listing location, especially for life science companies. So we, the primary markets team, are here for you and provide you with personal support before, during, and after going public, whenever this becomes a topic for you. With that said, I wish you an exciting event and look forward to meeting you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. Our last speaker today, before the one-on-one session starts in a little while, is from the financing vehicle Eurostars, which is a European collaboration represented here by Peter Lindberg from the Swedish innovation agency Vinnova. Welcome, Peter.
Good day, everybody. My name is Peter Lindberg. I'm from the Swedish innovation agency Vinnova. And today I'm going to bring some information on the Eurostars program for all participants in the Swiss Nordic Bio Conference. So the Eurostars program is run in collaboration with the European Commission and is jointly funded by Eurostars countries. And there are 36 countries overall. You can see them on the little map up in the right-hand corner. And as you see, Sweden and Switzerland and the Nordic countries are among the Eurostars participating countries. In Eurostars, this is focused on small and medium enterprises and international collaboration projects. Large companies and research organizations can also join as project partners. Eurostars is about the development of innovative products, processes, or services. Market introduction should be within 2 years after the end of the project. But most important, for life science products, there is specific rules so that you can also perform your clinical trials and then still have 2 years to market entry. Most European countries participate in Eurostars, as I mentioned, but also Canada, Korea, and South Africa. So there's big scope for international collaboration in this program. And life science research, development, and innovation projects fits very well in this program. So this is encouraged. And here are some unique selling points about the Eurostars program. Projects with 2 partners are eligible. As you may know, in the European Framework Program, the ground rule is it should be 3 partners from 3 countries. Here it's enough with 2 independent partners from 2 countries. The objectives of the projects are set by the project partners according to the bottom-up principle. So it's your idea that is developed in the project. The project administration is low compared to other international innovation programs. In Eurostars, there's central application, evaluation, and monitoring. And when the project starts, you get funded on national level from your own funding agency. So it's possible to if you have problems and you contact us, you can talk in your own language. And then regarding next cutoff dates, Eurostars is usually run with 2 calls per year, one in spring and one in autumn. This year is a little special. There is a running Eurostars call now that closes on the 4th of February, so this is a little close if you haven't considered to participate. The next call will probably be in September 2021 under the Eurostars 3 program in the new Horizon Europe Framework Program. But all the decisions between the member countries and the European Commission has not been made yet. So this is still to be confirmed. And let me say a few words about the typical Eurostars project. It doesn't have to be very large, and involve a large number of partners from several countries to be kind of competitive and successful in the evaluation. A typical project has 3 to 4 participants from 2 to 3 countries. There should be an SME that is coordinating the project, but then it's totally flexible. Average duration of the project is 30 months, and average project cost around 1.4 million. But of course, this is the average, and the project can be smaller or significantly larger if you need it to be. And here are some motives for participation in the Eurostars project. Well, it could be that you need to access someone else's science and technology, and this requires, of course, collaboration in a project. It could be that you have a solution for someone else. It could be that you need to access skills you don't have to complete your innovation process. It could be that your idea actually requires collaboration across the value chain. So you might want to involve in the project suppliers or customers as test beds. And finally, and maybe most important, is about sharing risks. Let me give you a short example. Let's say that you set up a bilateral Eurostars project between Switzerland and Sweden. The project costs will then be shared between you and your project partner, and this will of course reduce the risk in one step. Then the Swiss participant will be co-funded by the Swiss Innovation Agency InnoSwiss, and the Swedish participant is co-funded by the Swedish Innovation Agency Vinnova. National co-funding on both sides in the project will of course further reduce the development risks. So this is one of the main benefits of the Eurostars program. So, and then I will give you some details about the funding conditions in Switzerland and Sweden. In Switzerland, they have a funding grant. It's 50% of eligible costs for small and medium-sized enterprises, universities, and R&D institutions. It's 25% of eligible costs for large companies. And then there's a level, a maximum amount of funding per project. It's 500,000 euros when a Swiss SME participates, and it's 250,000 euros without a Swiss SME. The success rate in the recent calls has been above 30% for Switzerland, and this is really good. On the Swedish side then, the funding grant is 50% of eligible costs for SMEs, 70% for universities and R&D institutions. And I should mention that here we base the costs on full overhead for the universities and R&D institutions. And then you can have 70% of that from Vinnova. It's 30% of eligible cost for large companies. And we also have a funding roof per project. It's 5 million Swedish kronor, approximately 500,000 euros, with a Swedish SME participating, and it's 2 million Swedish kronor without a Swedish SME. For example, if it's only a large company or a university from Sweden participating in the project. And on our side, the success rate is a bit lower. It's around 25% for Swedish participants. So I would also like to give you a project example from Eurostars. And this is a medtech project. Its title is Hand in Mind, Rehabilitation for Stroke Patients. And what was it about? It was to develop a robotic glove system to support everyday activities and rehabilitation for stroke patients. And the companies that participated in these specific projects was 3 SMEs, 1 from Sweden, 1 from Switzerland, and 1 from the Netherlands. And of course, I mean, this is one possibility for a Eurostars consortium, and you can also think about other type of consortia, I mean, including large companies and even multinational companies. They are frequently also participating in Eurostars projects. So this is one example. It can look quite different also. And I should also mention that it's possible, of course, this was medtech. It's also possible to do other type of life science projects, drug development projects, for example. But then you have to check maybe with your national funding agency if they support clinical trials as a cost in the project. And also from experience, good not to base an entire Eurostars projects on clinical trials. Maybe a phase 1 study can be a work package in the end of a Eurostars project, but it should involve mostly preclinical activities in the R&D phase. And then finally, I will give you some contact information. So here you see the Eureka and Eurostars contact persons in the Nordic countries. Please contact your national Eurostars contact, and they can give you further advice. And they will also be able to, maybe a little bit further in the spring this year, give you information on when the next Eurostars call will actually occur. But for now, we calculate on September 2021. And good luck with your future Eurostars proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was the end of the presentation part of the conference. We will now take a break, and the one-on-one meetings start at 1 p.m. Central European time. and continue during tomorrow as well. For you who recently joined here, I repeat what I said this morning. You find your meeting schedule in your profile on the website, and you have also received an email from my colleague Mrna with practicalities and a link to the schedule. And I recommend you now to log in, if you haven't done so yet, log in advance now during the break and start a meeting to make sure everything works in your browser with the video and the sound. So that could be a good idea to try that out. If you have any problems, don't hesitate to contact us. We are here and we'll do our best to support you. You find the contact details to my colleagues Christopher and Mrna on the website by clicking contacts. I wish you a great meeting or great meetings actually, and have fun. Thank you very much.